There seems to be this prevailing belief among consultants that they need to be perceived as top-notch experts. Their expertise needs to be considered to be so far beyond the level of their client. The client should be looking up to them in their ivory tower, and that is somehow a requirement for the sale. If they think I'm enough of an expert, they see enough of a gap between what they know and what I know, and if I can exaggerate that gap, I'm more likely to close deals. Is this true?
I think it's, like most things, partially true. I'll fence sit for a moment here. I think there's certainly a need to be seen as the person who understands the problem and has some kind of an answer. But I do think it's counterproductive, like anything taken too far. And I think that's probably what you're getting at is, pulling yourself or positioning yourself so far away from the client and relying on only that, right? Relying on only the gap in knowledge is the thing that I think actually has the client more repelled by than drawn towards you. So I don't think that it's not necessary, but I think there's much more to it than showing your expertise.
Yeah, I think that the idea that if they perceive me to be this really, really big time expert is potentially guiding people towards behavior that's counterproductive. And I think that we even somehow perpetuate this in some of our marketing and messaging. You got to be the expert. You got to be. It's true. You have to be the expert. I'm not saying it's wrong. If you are not considered to be an expert in the problem that you solve, they will not hire you. Or if they hire you, they will hire you as a pair of hands. Mm-hmm. They'll hire you as someone that can potentially, like, logistically, manipulate the problem, as opposed to the expert that's going to come in and provide a strategy, which is absolutely what you want. You want to be the expert. But I find that some people are so preoccupied with proving it, and they go to such great lengths to prove it, that they almost end up in an effort to prove their expertise beyond a reasonable doubt. They almost end up speaking in a language that nobody actually understands.
Yes.
Unless they're also a, top level expert.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. 100%. It's kind of, I think about this similar to the way that I think about hiring somebody, right? When you want to hire someone in your organization, you hire them for two reasons. The first is that they're capable of doing the job. So that's the equivalent to being the expert. But the second, and the one that is more important, is that you want to work with them, right? That you see some alignment, that you think they understand what needs to happen, that you believe that they have the best interests of, in your organization, or in this case, you, the prospect, in mind. And that's the piece I think that consultants can miss really easily, because they're so connected to their expertise that they forget about the part which is needing to actually relate to the human being in front of them. That's exactly what you're talking about, right? Speaking in some jargon that nobody understands, or speaking as if, everything you're saying is understood already, is definitely problematic, because then you can't have the connection. And we talk a lot about the fact that when someone's hiring a consultant, they're hiring you, they're hiring the human being as well, right? And so you need to make sure that they can see who that human being is and understand that they're going to be able to make the connection and be able to work with you and want to work with you through what may be a difficult problem-solving exercise.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Warren Buffett's example, right? Warren Buffett famously only invests in things he understands, right? It's like Coca-Cola, insurance, etc., right? And many value investors have followed suit, right? And if they understand very complex things, then that's what they invest in. Yeah, that's a pretty sound, proven investment philosophy. Invest in things you understand. You don't need to understand the ins and outs, but you need to understand it sufficiently to conclude that it's a good investment, bad investment. And I think clients are making a similar assessment. They don't necessarily think about it that way, right? But if they can understand what you're saying, if they can understand the logic behind your approach, your philosophy, the way that you do things, why you do them that way, If they can track you, they're much more likely to buy from you, versus if you're speaking at a level they can't even comprehend and it's leaving them more confused and they think you're an expert. That person really knows their stuff, but I don't really fundamentally understand what we'd be doing together. Your expertise is almost too broad, too lofty, if you will. That, yes, you've proven expertise, but you haven't made it relatable. They don't understand it sufficiently to buy it. That's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. They know that you can solve problems, right? You can solve some amorphous, yet to be defined, really complex problem. But what they don't know is that you're going to be able to solve their problem because you've not made that connection. You've not made it clear to them.
Yeah. And that's a big reason why we focus, in our program around this idea of a results mechanism. What is a results mechanism? It is a way of solving a tangible client problem for a specific type of client. It is your expertise applied to a specific problem in a specific context. So to use a metaphor, your expertise is like the engine of a car. Okay. This is the car guy metaphor. Okay. Apologize. Right? It's the engine, right? And you could have a fantastic engine with a lot of power, a lot of horsepower. That's your expertise. But if you don't have a transmission in that car, a transmission converts the power from the engine and sends it to the wheels. Without a transmission, the car goes nowhere. It's just an engine. It's a powerful engine, does zero good, right? That's like unrelatable expertise, unapplied expertise. It's very impressive. It's an impressive work of engineering, does nothing for me. Unless you have a transmission or, a process, if you will, of converting that energy and that power into, to the wheels so that the car moves. And so I think what clients are looking for is, yeah, they want to know that you've got an engine. Absolutely. You've got to have an engine. That's got to be clear. But they also need to see that you have a process by which you can translate that power, that expertise into tangible results. And that's probably where consultants don't spend enough time and energy thinking about, how do I make this relatable and applied so that they can come to a place of belief that my expertise can turn into a tangible business outcome for them.
And it comes down to something that we talk about so often, which is framing what you do in the language of your clients. And so many consultants come at it from the other direction, right? I'm going to, create this brilliant presentation. I'm going to create this, social media marketing, whatever it is, based on what I know. And without really, digging in and finding out how your clients see the problem and how your clients want to see it solved, you can be completely missing the boat. And so, it goes back to listening. It goes back to removing yourself from this, perch of the expert and really getting, down on the front line and having conversations with the people who are suffering from whatever it is that you're trying to help them with. And recognizing that the fact that you know more isn't necessarily an advantage in this case. The fact that you know more is going to help you down the line when you go to solve the problem. But right now, what you need to know the most about is how the clients are feeling and how they're speaking about the problem so that you can, use that. You can have empathy for them. You can have understanding for them. And that not only helps them feel that you're going to be in the trenches with them, you're going to be there to solve the problem, but it just simply helps you speak in their language. And as you said before, speaking in a language that they can understand is more important than anything else.
Yeah. What most experts do is when they speak or they create some marketing or they publish on LinkedIn, they start publishing on the intricacies of the engine.
Yes.
Well, this is the fuel combustion process, and it's got these many overhead cams, and it's these many cylinders, and like all this stuff that really only you and your expert peers give a damn about, right? And that's actually really common. Is folks say, "Well, I'm publishing on LinkedIn, but the only people that are engaging with it are my peers."
Yes.
It's a telltale sign that you're publishing for your peers, and it may be interesting to them, but they're not your client. Ultimately, your client wants, again, the vehicle that will get them from A to B, and they're much more interested in relatable material that helps them navigate that journey than they are in the the details and the intricacies of your expertise that only your peers would find relevance in.
It's almost worth stopping there for a moment, because we also see people falling into the trap of just enjoying that a whole lot, right? And thinking that, just because my post got X number of comments, it must be doing well, right? And that's true if you just want your post to do well, if you just want to have an interesting conversation with a bunch of people. But, the person that you're speaking of that says, like, I've noticed that it's only my peers that are responding, that person at least has gone far enough down the path that they recognize that there's a challenge there, right?
Yeah.
Because it can feel really good. Those are the people, your peers are the ones that are going to recognize your brilliance. Your peers are the ones that are going to challenge you. You're going to have some really interesting conversations. And guess what? You still won't have any clients. And so, really important to recognize right at the very beginning of doing any kind of outreach or putting any kind of thought leadership out, why you're doing it. And it's not just to have your ego buffed, and it's not just to, connect with other people that are doing the same thing that you're doing. Those are lovely side effects potentially, but it's really to find the people that have the problem.
I would go as far as to say that your peers should find your marketing material superficial.
A little bit boring.
It sounds extreme, but I think there's something there, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't want them to be super engaged, because that means that you're probably not being relatable to your actual audience. You want them to be like, oh, this is kind of obvious. This feels like marketing. This isn't really speaking to the technicalities of the matter. Like, you want that kind of response, because that's more likely to produce a message that's actually, understandable to your audience. And at the same time, I understand why you want to have peer level conversations. That's not wrong. That's not bad. I just think you need the right vehicle for it, right? That's why you go to conferences. That's why you speak. That's why you have masterminds and networking avenues where you can actually talk to your peers and engage in very high level conversations. There's nothing wrong with that. Just don't build your marketing strategy around it.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of reasons why this happens as well. There's also the challenge that a lot of consultants face, where they're so used to being in the work that they kind of start to assume that everybody knows as much as they do, that everybody kind of gets it, right? And so having to remind yourself what your prospects really truly know, and what information, as basic as it might seem to you, is going to be compelling to them, means you need to, get out of just being connected to the people who can speak at the same level as you do, and really understand what it is that needs to be said otherwise, so that people can hear you.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example of this. And you mentioned earlier as well, the importance of connecting with the market and understanding their language and their frames. And I think, even among people who do that, there's often a gap in how closely they're actually listening. Right? You can listen to the words. Let me put it this way: when you talk to a customer or a prospect, at one level, you can get the language that they use. And that language is very valuable. How they describe the problem, what words they use to articulate what they're experiencing, what words they use to describe their pain points and their challenges, what options they see available to them in the marketplace, what they think a solution might look like. This is all extremely valuable information. It's what's loosely called in the business voice of customer. Voice of customer is powerful stuff. A lot of that material you can copy and paste into your marketing. But there's a deeper level of insight here, which I think is lost upon most people unless they're really looking for it, which is, why are they asking these questions? What are the prevailing beliefs or worldviews that they have that are prompting this objection or this question or this need or this challenge? Like, what's going on underneath the surface? In other words, how is all of this the product of their thinking? And how can I better understand how they think, like under the hood? So I'll give you an example. I was talking to a gentleman earlier today who's considering engaging with the 90-day pipeline. And he's really hung up on how much work is going to be required to publish. Right. And understands the importance of publishing and why it's valuable, but just really stuck on, like, am I going to be able to do it? How much work is it? Okay. And, I can address that at face value, and that's, there's value in that. But there's a thought process underneath this that's yielding the objection, right? And that's really where the value is in all of your conversations, is what are the beliefs that this person has about this process or about this problem or about this solution that's yielding this particular question or objection. And the value in the conversation is in getting deeper underneath the surface to understand what are the preconceived notions or assumptions they have about this that I need to address. And when you talk about listening to your customers, having conversations, I just want to be really clear that it's that like deep discovery is where the value is. You can capture the language, and that's really valuable. But that deeper discovery that helps you better understand how your prospect thinks about the problems they're facing and the solutions available to them, that's where the real valuable insight is.